Hello, Not Manly here, and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program. We are rescuing Sam V. Kerman in very, very high Eve orbit. This mission will have big implications for our future mission to Gilly, because we need to be able to return from this altitude at least, if not higher. This is our standard Eve orbiter. With a little bit of an extra boost on the top, we've got an FLT-200 fuel tank and a Terrier liquid fuel engine, the most efficient engine we've got available at the moment. Very high efficiency, but right now very, very low thrust. So all we can do is get the thing into orbit, and you might see that detachment manifold there. That's a part test here. We are hoping to have this sponsored by OMB Demolition. We got a contract here to test that in a suborbital trajectory, so we're trying to make as much use of the funds that we have as we can, getting help from our corporate sponsors there. The problem we're going to have returning from this altitude is how low can we safely descend into Eve atmosphere at periapsis without burning up and exploding. We're going to be finding that out on this mission. In the meantime, I'm mostly worried about signal right now. If I don't have any signal to control this probe, I won't be able to get Sam V home safe at all, because I'll have no control over this probe. As it turns out, I kind of looked out here, because we still have a test probe on its way out of the Eve system, and at some point I lose contact with the Space Center on Eve. But then I pick up that relay from that really high probe with the relay antennas. Very fortunate for me. But we do manage to get this out on an ejection burn out towards Sam V's orbit. But I'm looking at my delta V amounts and I am a little worried there. It took quite a bit just to get out there. And we're going to need considerable amounts of delta V for maneuvers to be able to catch up with his craft. So I'm a little worried we're going to come up short on this. But no matter, if we do come up short, I have a cunning plan to bring Sam V home safe. Take a look at how I'm lining up, or trying to line up, the ascending node with my intercept there. That way it doesn't matter what my orbital plane is compared to my target. If I line up the ascending node with that, when I go to slow down to match speeds with that craft, it will change the plane of the orbit for me. In the meantime, this probe that I had left on an escape trajectory for a pot test happens to have a couple of relay antennas on it. So I try to retrieve it quickly, and I have, I think, just enough delta V to bring this thing back into a very high elliptical Eve orbit. There's that atom liquid fuel engine that we had from last time. Oh, there we go. Just figuring out how quick this burn can be here. I only have a few hundred meters per second, but a few hundred meters per second is all I need. And now we've recaptured that probe for use as a relay. Now we have enough funds now that we can upgrade the launch pad. That has been a stumbling block trying to get larger craft into Eve low orbit, but now we can do that. We're also going to try to solve our signal problem, but take a look at the cost of this craft. Only 35,000 funds. That's because the majority of this ascent vehicle is solid rocket boosters, and a lot of them. If I can get this thing up into the high Eve upper atmosphere, that Terrier liquid fuel engine should be able to finish the job for me, assuming I can get it high enough and safe enough. It took quite a bit of experimentation to figure out the best ascent profile for this craft. But once I got it, I was able to send up, well, pretty much on 2 or 3 of these things. The real trick was when to detach that final kickback solid rocket booster, because if I detached too soon, the Terrier wouldn't be able to maintain control. If I detached too late, I would fall back into the atmosphere, and so on. And there we had a quick pot test. We had the medium landing gear. They wanted to test them on a suborbital trajectory, and there we go. But a little bit of funds back for that craft, in addition to sending up a relay, and I have barely enough delta V for a low Eve orbit at about 100 kilometers up. But that's better than no relays in space at all. while we were planning that out, we sent Fovi Kerman for a little bit of exercise here in the night shift, and she stumbled upon this big old hole in the ground on the way up trying to do some survey contracts. So we brought up KerbNet. All we can do right now is get elevations, but elevations are good enough considering that it's just a big old hole in the ground. We want to investigate this later, so we're going to use KerbNet. We'll pass over it, and we'll leave a waypoint out here so we can come chase this location later. Very mysterious hole in the middle of some otherwise very ordinary terrain on Eve. And then we land Fovi safe, and she goes out to do some ground survey contracts, and then she's done. Also during the night shift we send Jebediah up with 3 tourists and Bob. Bob does not yet have orbital experience, so there was an extra seat. We just brought him aboard here. This tourist run barely pays for the rocket, but most importantly we got Bob up here for a little bit of orbital flight experience. Bob will be able to return higher value on science measurements with an extra star in rank. And Jeb brings everybody back home safe, if not quite completely safe, because on touchdown we lose that heat shield. But hey, the heat shield was the only thing we lost and everybody else is safe, and we're not falling over. And we were also sending up rescue craft. We had additional folks stranded in low Eve orbit, and we were able to bring them back. We had an additional pilot and an additional scientist. And there we go. After a very, very hard night at the night shift, Fovi Kerman looks out the runway, looking at that gorgeous Eve sunrise, the start of the second day of the Kerbal Space Program. Get some rest, Fovi, you're gonna need it. And in the meantime, we are setting up for Samvi's rendezvous. We are still a little concerned about the amount of Delta V on this rescue craft. But again, we have a cunning plan to be able to bring him home safe. As long as we have enough Delta V to catch up with him, that's good enough. We'll be able to figure it out from there once we catch up with him. And I go to set up an alarm clock entry here to let me know when rendezvous is about to occur, and then I take a look at the alarm list. Our departure window for Bin is closing rapidly. By the time we catch up with Samvi, it will be too late to send a craft out to Bin without spending way more Delta V than we need to. So, let's just quickly set up this alarm for the rendezvous, and then let's get back to the Space Center and throw together a craft, any craft, that can get out to Bin. We need at least 1800 meters per second once in low Eve orbit. Let's see if we can cram more. So we go with the LVT 400 liquid fuel tank. This craft should get us at least 4 kilometers per second once it's in space. Once we can get it into space, at least. We'll put it on our Eve orbiter launcher. We've only got just the basic science and our best antennas that we can, because way out there we might not get enough signal without those really strong antennas. And there we go. We'll go to our sub-assemblies. We saved the Eve orbital launcher from those orbiter craft, and here we go. As long as we can get this thing into orbit, the Terrier engine on that top stage should be enough to get to Bin, and even be able to maneuver around a bit if we can get it up there. But that craft is so much heavier than the tourist compartments we've been sending up. So this could be a problem, and I find myself struggling, and rather than stage away 3 of those engines, I end up firing all 7 as long as I can to get as much speed as I can. And now I am on that swivel, and I am fighting for my life here trying to get this craft into low Eve orbit. having to pitch up. This is not very efficient at all. In fact, I go a little too fast and those basic fins start to pop off one by one. But here I am trying to keep time to AP above 0. Tilting up as much as I can. And there we go, we finally managed to get enough speed, but then we finally lose the last fin. It doesn't matter though, there's not enough air up this high to worry about it anymore. We've got this craft into low Eve orbit, and if we can close our orbit on that swivel, then we'll have that full 4 kilometers per second of that Terrier engine to get out to bin. Still worried about signal though, but as it turns out, we actually pick up a relay. We're probably picking up that fog. Nope. Oh, we actually got through the clouds back to another relay into the Space Center. And there we go. Using Trigger AU's transfer window planner, we want to leave right now. So we give it a plot for right now, and we tell it, hey, show me how to get out of here. And it hopefully shows us which way to go. We can plan our maneuver right around that without having to faff about with the position on Eve's orbit. Ends up being a little more than 1800 meters per second. It's much closer to 2 kilometers per second, but we've got over 4 kilometers per second. We have fuel and delta V to spare. Now let's look at where bin is. There's bin. Bin is that place that we think Val saw on her first way up. A pair of lights there, a blue-green light and a very gray light. There we go, closest approach. Again, I am lining up my closest approach with one of the ascending or descending nodes. That way, when we get out there, we'll have an easier time lining up once we get out there, once we go to slow down. We do get an encounter, but I do want to improve on it some more. We are just about ready though. We've got to go right now. Look at that, thrusting for its life, 2 kilometers per second delta V, just to get out of the Eve system. Playing this at 4 times regular speed for your convenience, otherwise we'll be sitting here all day. This will be the first craft we send out of Eve's sphere of influence and to the sphere of influence of another body in this system. We don't know what bin is, we don't know what's out there, we don't know why Valentina is so worried about this place, but we're going to go find out, even with the most basic science aboard. Oh, there we go. We get an encounter, and we set this up. See, that's when you line up the ascending or descending node with your rendezvous, then you've got better control over where it actually crosses. There we go. We're going to turn the thrust down on this engine for some really fine maneuvering if we can. We want to save as much as we can. See if we can get this encounter lined up well before we even get there. We might have lots of delta V, but every meter per second counts on this trip. 40 kilometers. That's about where we should have it there. They can't have a thicker atmosphere than Eve. That'd be about right, about the right altitude and so forth. In the meantime, we are finally able to catch up with Samvi's rescue craft. Now that we've got the transfer window to bin set up. And very similar here, we've got the ascending node set up with our rendezvous, so when we go to close our speed and close our distance, we automatically line up with their orbit. And there we go. This is the highest we've been, at least with a live purple aboard. How these guys got Samvi up here, I have no idea. But somehow they did it, and it's up to us to go fetch them. Look at that. Can't get any closer than that. And there he goes. Now all we got to do is point retrograde and thrust home. At least, that's what I hope we only gotta do. But then we use up all of our fuel and we are still way too high. Our periapsis is just under 500 kilometers. So, time for our cunning plan. We'll tell the Probodobodine HECS to point retrograde, and then we'll send out Samvi with a fresh load of EVA fuel, and he will get out and push. Pushing for his life, he gets periapsis as low as he can, as safe as he can. It takes a couple trips in and out, but we do manage to lower periapsis down to about, what? We've been shooting for 35, but I'm worried that's a little too low coming up from this high. So I set it to 38? No? I gotta look at that again once we get aboard here. Let's find out what that periapsis was. Come on, Sam, you get aboard there so I can see what's going on. 34. We are taking an awful risk. We would be re-entering at 35 from the low Eve orbit, not from this high. Can only hope the ablator on that heat shield is enough to keep us safe. That looks like it will be a very, very treacherous re-entry. 34 kilometers up from, my goodness, from over 1,500 kilometers up. And here we go. And look at that. The atmosphere grips and grabs hold right away. We're burning the ablator like nothing. But the only thing overheating is the heat shield. That is good. The heat shield can stand a lot of heat even without any ablator on there. And I think Samvi's going to be safe. Okay. We didn't get captured this time, but that's okay. We wiped off a lot of speed with that pass. Turns out it only takes a couple more passes for Samvi to get back safe. There's the second pass. This is still very fast. Look at that, nearly Mach 19. We got no signal, but that's okay. The HECS probe helps Samvi keep this thing's pointed prograde. Pretty good that this probe doesn't need signal as long as there's a capable purple aboard. Second pass. At this point, periapsis is a much more reasonable, 153, 51, 50, 149. There we go, a much more reasonable 143. We don't have much ablator left, but that's okay. From this height, he should be able to come in safe. As it turns out, that's what happens. Samvi does come home safe. Just to get you all updated, this is going to be the last Kerbal Space Program episode for some time. I've got a project coming in the next few days and I won't have time to continue this series for some time. But in a few days I will be able to resume it, and then we will be able to get out to Gilly. Now that we know we can get back from this height reasonably safe, getting back from Gilly should be okay. We'll just watch Samvi Kerman come back. Then when we get back, we will get out to Gilly, and we will get more science, and we will be able to research better plots, getting ever closer to our single stage to orbit craft for Eve. There we go. Landed on the opposite side of the planet, but that's okay. We'll catch up with Samvi in a future episode. Until then, I'm not Manly. Fly safe.